There is something else that I'd like to ask you, because I read also that you spent, if I'm not wrong, you spent 8 years teaching at the New York University, right?
Yes, yes.
Psychodrama. How was it? I'm asking this because it's not always seen people. I don't see many people going to a university, and this is probably one of the reasons why psychodrama is not necessarily well known, because we don't normally we don't go to the public university. Well, I knew that Moreno spent many years in New York at the university at teaching sociodrama, psychodrama in sociology department, no? But how was your experience? What did you get from these 8 years teaching
Well,
psychodrama at the university?
it was the same course in courses. I taught 2 semesters, and so it was repeated the same every year, right? I taught with one class, so it wasn't new material every year. I taught in the dramatherapy department. Robert Landy was the director, and I had a great time teaching. It was fun, and it was interesting, and it was interesting to work with Robert, and we'd try to figure out how to marry dramatherapy and psychodrama. That kind of thing was fun. It was fun to teach at a college. I liked all that, but eventually I find working in the field more creative, more challenging, because I like to change things all the time. I'm in double Aries, and I want to always start things new. Nina Garcia is teaching that right now. She's just an excellent teacher. She taught my son. She's just a great teacher, and she's somebody who can really make the material alive for students. For me, I like to work with the pathology, with the really, I like to work with the people who are, I missed the field. I kept being in the field during that time because I was very part-time. But I then got very much more active in the addictions field and developing programming for working with addicts in early recovery. It's tricky, but psychodrama was all over the place in the addictions field. Everybody was using it, but they weren't using it as well as they could be.
Mm-hmm. But if we look at the time you spent with the addiction problems, no, and the non-addiction, because of course psychodrama can be used for whatever. How much time do you devote to the addiction area vis-a-vis the other one, and how do you feel about that?
Well, it's a good question. I've asked myself that question a lot because I really work with addiction and trauma. That's sort of what I do. And I think, that's where I live, because that's where my soul is. I'm in these two fields, psychodrama and addiction. And that was my doctorate. My thesis was using psychodrama in the addictions field. My dissertation, rather. It's what I'm kind of about, is adapting psychodrama for use with trauma. I mean, you don't really work with addiction, you work with trauma, right? Because you're working with why somebody's self-medicating. So I think if I were two people, I would do a lot of the lighter stuff, or maybe lighter isn't the right word for it, but the non-trauma community. But first of all, there is no non-trauma community. Every time every time we're all traumatized somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And because trauma is really what happens to you on the inside, right? You're not working with trauma, because you don't work with the actual trauma. You don't say, let's recreate that, car that bumped into you, or let's recreate the scene of the sexual abuse. That's not how you would work with trauma. You'd work, let's talk to the part of you that froze. Let's talk to the part of you that dissociated because what was going on around you was terrifying you. And so let's find those lost parts of yourself and embody them and concretize, embody them, talk to them, reverse roles, talk as them, back to yourself. Now reverse again. Keep visiting this part of yourself and bring back a little more each time into aliveness. You know, develop a relationship wherein you listen to this part of yourself. You're aware, you're loving, you're generous to this part of yourself. You don't cast them aside and tell them to shut up and send them to hell again, and bring them back towards you, bring them back towards you. Let's develop a relationship so that this part of yourself can live safely within you. Because otherwise what happens is when you get triggered, when this part of yourself gets triggered, you shout at the world. And you shout at your spouse or your children or whatever and screw up your relationships because you're importing this old pain that doesn't make sense when it's jammed into today's relationships. So children adjust to that by thinking they're the problem, right? Then they try to solve what they perceive to be the current problem, but there is no current problem. There's a parent who hasn't done their own work. So we need to do that to unburden our own children. We also need to do it so that we can communicate clearly, because otherwise, when these parts of ourselves get triggered, we talk to the world as the wounded child. And then we say, wait a minute, they're not listening. They're not giving me what I need. And that's a very superficial take on recovery. I remember doing a workshop one time, and somebody said in actual words, I don't know, I'm doing all the things people are saying. I'm telling everybody what I need, and they're not giving it to me. And she was genuinely bewildered by that. And I thought, yeah, so that's the idea the wounded child has, that if I get it straight, if I get all my boundaries in place, if I say what I need clearly, the world will then come and fulfill it. That's not how it works. The world doesn't want to really hear from your wounded child all the time. They want to hear from the adult that has synthesized that part of you and can talk in real time, in real words, with an adult perspective on who they are on the inside. And that way you can say, what I would like from this moment, if it works for you, is this. It becomes relational. But the first relationship that needs to happen is the reconnection with the part of the self that has been disconnected from. And then that's the trauma work. And the other part of the trauma work is to be able to articulate that part of the self clearly enough so it makes some sense to another person, and so that it actually includes another person. And that's the role reversal part of development. This is the first part, is get the double, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. The next part is, oh, there's a world and there are other people in the world. And if it needs to work for both of us, right? It needs to work for all of us. We're not islands unto ourselves. So that means we need to be able to tolerate, to understand what we're feeling so we can say it clearly, to then listen to what somebody else is saying without absolutely exploding, to incorporate some of what they're saying into our thinking. That's why traumatized people become very rigid thinkers. They're rigid. And if you can't incorporate bits and pieces of the world, you don't really, there's a whole part of yourself you never find. It's like when raising my children, I always just wanted to get them started, because the rest of themselves, they'll find out there. They just need to have the right tools so that they can access the world and find that part of themselves. And career-wise, I always felt, you bump into your career. I don't think you sit in some room and think, what do I really want to do in life? And I think, who does that? You get a job, and then you have to solve, like you did with the drama games. You were faced with a very unusual circumstance. And how do I solve this? How do I reach them? How do I get to what I know I want to get to, but warm them up towards that? Who do I become in the process that I wasn't before? Who do they become? That's how the building of the self happens also. It's not in isolation. And that's the fun of life too, you know. And so trauma keeps us from our fun. At the very basic, it keeps us from our fun. And it's what Morena called pathological spontaneity, the spontaneity of the idiot. It's
Yes.
so funny. I mean, it's so irreverent.
The spontaneous idiot, right? Yeah.
And it's the truth. This, you know, this stuff. It's like you turn on TV. Oh my God. You know, the things they're showing children. Hey, and or the newscasters. Whatever. I mean, you just want to bury your head in the sand. It's the spontaneity of the idiot. It's something that's meant to look fun. You know, Mr. Rogers is the only one who was really spontaneous. He really was.